Bonjour à tous. Bonjour pour cette deuxième journée de nos dialogues virtuels organisés par FAN. Et c'est un plaisir pour moi de savoir que vous êtes de plus en plus nombreux à être présents après la très belle journée d'hier. Merci de participer à cette séance. Je suis Henri Joubert, vice-président pour les finances du Conseil international des archives, et je voulais vous rappeler qu'au-delà des réflexions professionnelles que vous menez et dont ces dialogues sont l'expression très claire, c'est vous qui faites vivre le Conseil international des archives, l'ICA. Vous participez en effet à 85 à 90% de notre budget, donc merci. Merci pour votre contribution à notre vie de tous les jours. C'est grâce à vous que nous existons. Notre profession, nous l'exerçons dans un contexte difficile, avec des défis permanents, et c'est en partie cela que nous allons examiner aujourd'hui pour une deuxième journée. Et nous savons aussi que nous venons de traverser 2 années extrêmement difficiles dans le contexte de cette épidémie qui ne cesse de nous accompagner, dont nous espérons un jour sortir. Et puis nous avons aussi ce contexte de difficultés entre peuples et la terrible situation de l'Ukraine à laquelle nous pensons tous les jours. Donc, c'est dans ce contexte-là que nous tenons ces dialogues. Je voudrais vous donner quelques détails pratiques avant de commencer, vous rappeler que vous disposez d'une interprétation en anglais, français et espagnol que vous trouvez sur la barre d'outils Zoom, c'est le bouton interprétation de langue au bas de votre écran. Nous vous encourageons également à poser vos questions dans la boîte Q&A, questions et réponses, question and answers, et nos intervenants répondront à l'issue de leur séance à vos questions. Si vous avez des problèmes techniques, laissez-nous aussi être au courant de ces difficultés à travers le même moyen ou éventuellement par le Zoom chat. Notre premier dialogue aujourd'hui portera sur le sujet « Faire appel aux nouvelles technologies pour résoudre de vieux problèmes » et commencera dans un moment. Et plus tard dans l'après-midi, à 4 heures, heure British Standard Time, notre deuxième conversation portera sur le thème « La mise en commun des ressources afin d'améliorer l'accessibilité aux documents ». Chacun de ces dialogues durera environ 90 minutes, questions comprises. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à la présidente de la première séance qui vous présentera les différents intervenants. Donc, la présidente est mon amie Esther Olembe, directrice des Archives nationales du Cameroun, à qui je passe la parole. Bienvenue Esther.
Bonjour Henri. Alors, good morning everybody. Okay, good. Okay. Good morning everybody. I have the honor to chair this special session talking about new technologies to solve old problems. The main whole duties in archives are, as we know, is collecting, filing, conserve, and communicate. At the same time, the dictatorship of information and communication technologies forces us to review our practices and sometimes to reconsider our paradigms and theoretical models that have long shaped our disciplines. We can therefore wonder about what has really changed. In order to approach this question in a pragmatic way, 4 panelists will talk to us about concrete experiences of application of ICTs to the management of archives. We have 90 minutes approximately, and we have 4 panelists. The first panelist is Yaso Arumugam. She's Chief Information Officer, Chief Information Security Officer of National Archives of Australia. And to be very clear, Yaso is the Acting Director General for the National Archives of Australia, and is responsible for the operations, strategy, and planning of the agency. And in her substantive role, she is responsible for the National Archives of Australia digital, cyber capabilities, and data governance. She leads the implementation of digital preservation capabilities, cyber improvement measures, and implementing measures for stronger data governance of National Archives of Australia and Government Records Authority. Before joining the National Archives, Yaso was a senior executive service leader of the Department of Defense and led a number of branches of the Chief Information Officer group at Defense. Your role includes leading the delivery of digital capability across a number of domains, including the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, geospatial and mobility and digitalization domain. So, Yaso we'll talk about applying artificial intelligence for the automated appraisal, the Australian experience. So in that paper, she's supposed to present us the outcome of $2 billion research initiative led by the National Archive of Australia into the potential of artificial intelligence technology to automate the particular way of archival appraisal of complex government data holdings. So yes, so you have maybe 20 minutes to present your. Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Esther. Let me just get my presentation. Okay, thanks, Esther. Yumalundi, hello, I'm Yaso Arumugam, and I'm the Acting Director General of the National Archives. I'm on Ngambri Ngunnawal lands, and I pay my respects to the custodians of the land and to elders past and present. So thank you for the opportunity to participate in this very exciting discussion. A little bit about the National Archives. So the National Archives of Australia is responsible for caring for the most significant records of the Australian federal government. The archives consists of tens of millions of items and includes records about immigration, military service, transport, Indigenous Australians, science and the environment, and much more. Most of these records were received, created, or kept by federal government agencies while performing their functions. The National Archives is established under the Archives Act 1983 and is an executive agency of the Australian federal government. For society to trust government information and data, they have to be authentic, reliable, and usable. The National Archives provides leadership in best practice management of the official record of the Australian government and ensures that Australian government information and data of enduring significance is identified, secured, preserved, and available to government agencies, researchers, and community. Access is provided while balancing privacy, security, confidentiality, and public interest. So we are always on the lookout for new technologies to solve our old and current problems. Some of these are mentioned in this slide. So I'll let you ponder upon those for a second. But now let's go to the challenge. So to explore one of the old challenges, archives put out a call to small to medium-sized business entities in Australia. The challenge was for automating complex determinations for Australian government information. The challenge included both the design and development of the records authorities to support machine execution and how to automate the application of the records authorities, that is sentencing. Following feasibility studies, the government awarded 2 business grants of $1 million each for proofs of concept to demonstrate addressing the challenge. We called it the $1 Million Challenge. So why do we need to solve this? It is because our current processes are manual, time-consuming, and will not scale to meet the growth in data. So we saw it as an urgent requirement that we had to explore a new way or using new technologies to find a solution. So what we need is a new solution designed specifically for archival purposes. Our research showed that sophisticated tools and technologies for automation had already improved many activities previously performed by humans only. However, during the proof of concept, the proof of concept demonstrated that further work was required for us to automate the appraisal of government information. So it took about 6 to 9 months. We had 2 vendors. Each had different processes and techniques. We used the same data set, but what we found was even after multiple goes through machine learning, because machine learning it's learning and using algorithms, the accuracy of the results when compared to human intervention, they were only around 50 to 60%. So it actually didn't meet our requirements to accept the proof of concept as readiness to move to the next stage. So what we need is a new solution. Skip slide, sorry. So what we need is a new solution designed specifically for archival purposes. The new solution we are looking for should deliver automated processes and tools for issuing National Archives retention and destruction authorization using advanced technologies. So this will replace our current processes where National Archives experts work with individual agencies and groups of agencies to analyze government functions and business activities and the context of individual agencies, identify requirements for creation and management of information and data that documents the work of government, and to describe and authorize these requirements. The solution we're looking for will deliver tools to apply these overarching macro appraisals, to apply those to authorizations in government agencies to automatically identify the value of information, and for these tools acting on those instructions to select information either for destruction or permanent preservation as evidence of the work and decisions of Australian government. I can go through more through the Q&A session, depending on where attendees want to ask questions. But look, although the proof of concept has now been completed, this is one that we're going to closely follow and watch, keep a very close eye on industry to see how they're moving. Because the work we do, we actually need the tools to be around 95% to 100% accurate. And we would phase it out where we can look at general records authorities that are simple and we could automate them, or we could go to the other side and look at the complex cases and automate them, so that will require more intelligence, more machine learning, and more algorithms where we need to be absolutely sure. And that then we have different talent looking at the transactional, regular, simple records authorities. So there's different ways to solve the problem. It depends on the ratio between the simple and the complex as well. So happy to talk more during Q&A session. Vuruguvuri, and thank you for listening to my presentation.
Okay, thank you.
I'll stop sharing my screen soon. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Yaso. Thank you for leaving us time to move on the next panelist. The next panelist is Ole Magnus Anderson. I hope that he's there. Yes, he's there. Ole Magnus Anderson is Deputy Director of the Danish National Archives. He's born in 1973. He's still young. He's have a Master in History from the University of Copenhagen and a Master of Public Governance from Copenhagen Business School. Since 2001, he has held various positions at the Danish National Archives and been Deputy Director since 2016. He served in the Program Committee for the ICA conference in Reykjavik in 2015, and he was an invited speaker at RUTEC 2020 in Salt Lake City. Ole Magnus, he will talk about large-scale digitalization by crowdsourcing. That is a new trend in our domain. So large-scale digitization by crowdsourcing is a rapidly expanding activity with the Danish National Archives. And he would like to share with us his experience, because in 2019, more than 2.5 million pages were digitized by volunteers and published on archives online. So his paper has that the quality of volunteer digitalization is on part with professional digitization, and that the empowerment of volunteers and the evolution of a community with a shared purpose has a positive impact on their quality of life. So Ole, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. It is my privilege. And also thank you, Yaso, for an interesting presentation. Well, I could say now to something completely different. First, thanks to FAN and ICA for giving me the opportunity to speak today on a topic that I very much care about, and a topic that I believe will become incrementally more relevant in the years to come. In its origin, this paper was supposed to be presented at the ICA conference in Abu Dhabi in 2020. But alas, a pandemic came in the way, as it has with so many other things. And I'm very happy to have the opportunity to present it to you today instead. I must admit it's a bit humbling to do it in front of an audience with so many professionals from archives and records offices all over the globe, but I will do my best. And next slide, please. And there's a little delay before we get the second slide. Is right here. For more than 30 years, the Danish National Archives has worked actively with volunteers. For the first 25 years, the primary goal was to transcribe and publish census records, church books, parish registers, and to services known as the Danish Demographic Database and the crowdsourcing portal, The work conducted by the volunteers is in many ways a stupendous achievement. Currently, volunteers have transcribed more than 25 million records that are readily available for genealogists, demographers, historians, and researchers from all fields of academia. On the slide, you can see a death certificate from 1887 in its original form and in its transcribed form. The digital transformation used here is very, very basic and old-fashioned, but it still works, and it has done and will still do a tremendous job in transforming yellowed paper data to digital big data. This work is continuing with the help of digital services and the use of handwritten text recognition. But that is not the primary topic of my presentation. And the next slide, please. Recently, the activity with transcribing has by and large been overtaken volunteers hosted by the National Archives, actively digitizing paper records for immediate publication on our internet service called Archives Online. With fewer and fewer visitors to our fall reading rooms due to the steady increase of the most popular records being available online, we have encountered the odd problem of what to do with the empty spaces. And some of my very bright colleagues have developed the idea to turn the reading rooms into digitization labs, where volunteers may help take part in the digitization process in controlled environments. It began in 2017 with a single effort in our reading room in Odense, and its immediate success made it easy to spread the effort to all of our fall reading rooms in our 4 locations in Denmark. And please, next slide. The growth in productivity and the process of going from experiment to what I think we can call large-scale production has been very tangible. In 2017, some 300,000 pages were digitized and published, and already in 2019, that number exceeded 2.5 million. Then, of course, as you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic struck, and the numbers for 2020 and 2021 were well below 2019 due to the various lockdowns. However, we are experiencing a return back to normal here in 2022, and we expect that more than a couple of million pages will be published this year, all produced by volunteers. Now, if you look at the table, you say 8 million digitized pages by volunteers may seem insignificant compared to the more than 112 million pages digitized by the National Archives, and counting, of course. But that's not really the truth. For the last 5 years, digitization by crowdsourcing represents approximately 1/3 of all digitized records published online. And that is significant. And we expect it to continue and perhaps even increase. And next slide, please. Volunteer work is often considered significantly less qualified compared to that of professional employees. However, the body of work that the volunteers have undertaken at the Danish National Archives does not really support this. The quality control of transcription is probably stricter within the crowdsourcing community than within the National Archives. And in addition, with the necessary facilitation, guidance, and technical setup, the quality of the digitized images produced by volunteers seem to be on par with the digitization undertaken by the Danish National Archives or professional subcontractors. Of course, this operation is not cost-free. The archival preparation, the necessary security measures, and the technical setup requires resources. But the most significant cost, that of digitization operators, is eliminated in this setup. But there are all other benefits too. An important aspect of the work undertaken by volunteers at the Danish National Archives is that the volunteers and their organizations themselves, it is the volunteers and their organizations themselves who decide what to digitize and what to transcribe. The selected material nearly always correlates with general user and research interests. And consequently, the outreach of the digitized and published records is very, very high. And next slide, please. Now, these crowdsourcing projects feature a crowd, of course, and this crowd may be defined as dedicated volunteers who contribute to improve access to the collections and their availability, which in turn benefits the general public from which volunteers are drawn. That's not something I found out. This is a quotation from a visiting scholar of the National Archives, Amy Clotworthy, who worked here in 2018. And the crowdsourcing projects facilitated by the Danish National Archives thus create communities with shared purposes, producing results that far exceed what could otherwise be expected in quantity as well as in quality. In her research here at the National Archives, Amy Clotworthy has illuminated the complex social aspects involved in cultural heritage crowdsourcing and digital humanities projects. And she points out that the greater societal and academic benefits of the work are inherently important. And just as significant are the essential human values, specifically how being part of a community with a shared purpose may lead to an improved quality of life among the volunteers. And unsurprisingly, the Danish National Archives is happy to facilitate this mutually beneficial process. And next slide, please. Now, all this is not just a process to facilitate volunteers and to provide records to genealogists. It also contributes to what we could call hard science. The data provided by the digitization and transcription made by volunteers is today vital for two projects hosted by the National Archives. Two projects that will map the population of Denmark all the way from 1787 with the first census to 1970 with linked life courses and intergenerational relations. And I'd like just to say a few words about one of the projects, which is called the Linked Lives Project. The aim of the Linked Lives Project is to extend the range of registered research based on Danish data from decades in the 20th century to centuries back. By combining historical research methods with deep learning techniques and artificial intelligence, we are reconstructing life courses and family relations of almost everyone who lived in Denmark from 1787 until the introduction of the modern Danish civil registration system in 1968, and it still works today. So you could say the history of everyone from 1787 until 2022 and counting. We are basically going to create a family tree of the entire Danish population back to 1787 with major life events such as birth, baptism, confirmation, marriage, relocation, birth of children, workplace, death, and burial represented. And that's basically what you can see on the slide. You have a female called Olga, and you can see all the major points in her life with where she's mentioned in censuses and in church books. And you can see her birth, her confirmation, her marriage, the birth of her 3 children, her second marriage, and eventually her death in 1945. And imagine that for the entire Danish population back to 1787. Next slide, please. This intergenerational work will make it possible to tell the stories of millions of individual life courses of our ancestors. But even more significantly, it will connect the life courses of our ancestors and provide a data set of immense value for demographic research, health sciences, genetics, social sciences, and of course, historical research. The first data set from the project will be made available for free for everybody this summer, and we really look forward to seeing it. Now, you may think that this will make pastime genealogy too easy, and that is to some degree right, but it creates the possibility of digging deeper into our collections and find the records that may tell more detailed stories of our ancestors than what you can read in a church book or a census. And that will once again greatly benefit not just genealogists, but also professional researchers from all fields of science. And next slide, please. Now, the work of our crowdsources has other benefits too. If we look at the searchability of our collections, mind you, only 3% of our collections are available online. The crowdsourcing community contributes to adding metadata, doing transcriptions, and lately beginning to do quality control of records made available with handwritten text recognition and tagging keywords. And here is the first common thing with Yaso's presentation. The latter activities are just emerging, but we fully expect them to blossom in the coming years so that we can actually use the new technologies in connection with our crowdsourcing activities. And I truly think that it is hard to overestimate the potential of their work. We have so many seniors in Denmark who want to participate in these activities, and it is really our task to facilitate the wish to do that. And the next and final slide, please. I hope I did not exceed my time with too much, and I hope you found it worthwhile. So thank you for listening, and I will of course take questions in the roundtable after Sylvain's presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this good experience about that new trends, crowdsourcing. As we know, as archiver, we are not the producer of the document, so it's better when a producer gives some way to how to index, how to arrange some information in particular documents. So now we are moving on the third, our third panelist. Our third panelist is Sylvain Bélanger. So Sylvain Bélanger is Senior Director General and CIO, Librarian and Archive of Canada. He's a Chief Information Officer and Chief Data Officer at Library and Archive Canada. Sylvain has been at Library and Archive Canada in various roles since 2005. He's responsible for leading and supporting all of LAC's digital activities with a particular focus on the optimization, transformation, and innovation of digital services to improve the customer and partner service. So Sylvain, I did not have the topic of your presentation, but if I have the information I have for the presentation is that we talk about digital transformation in the National Archives, a practical application. You will talk about how the digital transformation work is relevant to, for instance, decision maker and clients. And you will talk about digital transformation. If digital transformation want to survive, it cannot survive without his proper transformation, if I can say that. So you have the floor to talk about digital transformation in the National Archive.
Perfect, thank you. So thank you very much, everybody. So today I'll talk about Library and Archives Canada's digital transformation. So we're having moved from digital obsolescence to sustainable digital management. Just a little bit about Library and Archives Canada's mandate. It's to preserve the documentary heritage, to be a source of enduring knowledge, to facilitate the cooperation with the communities across Canada, and to be the continuing memory of the Government of Canada. So as the continuing memory of the Government of Canada, as a government institution, we must align our digital focus with that of the government. So I've put here the vision of the Government of Canada in terms of digital, which LAC tries to align its work to. So providing easy, accessible, integrated, and trusted public services to Canadians, better informed to support decision-making of government operations, and to foster and leverage a digital ecosystem that connects government, business, individuals, and others. And you'll see the digital ecosystem repeat itself in the presentation here. Of course, we all know in our institutions, digital transformation is not an easy thing to do because we're all facing some of these situations. It's not the simple digital transfer that we now think about and that we now hopefully do. But we have a legacy of challenges that we need to face going back decades. And so it's one small step is being able to implement new digital solutions, but there's a legacy piece that will also challenge us all and that we must deal with across our institutions. And quickly for Library and Archives Canada and our digital preservation, we have 18 petabytes of content. And we're now bringing in between 150 and 300 terabytes of new digital collections to Library and Archives Canada each month. And our current medium for long-term storage preservation is on LTO tapes. And the challenge, of course, on LTO tapes for preservation is that we now retrieve between 1 and 2 million digital objects from those tapes each year. So it becomes a challenge for all of us as this grows. So we are looking to the future for solutions that will expedite that process. So trying to solve the end-to-end data curation lifecycle. And we are doing that by investing heavily in the infrastructure that supports all of our operations across the organization. And specifically, we've gone towards putting together a digital asset management system. Oftentimes we talk about certain solutions that are part of our digital asset management system. We use Go Anywhere as our managed file transfer on the front end, and Preservica for a lot of the components integrated. But it's really a holistic system where we must address from the bottom up, as you see on the chart, the transfer and pre-ingest, digital asset management components, which are the green. And that's where we put a lot of our emphasis recently, but the storage, whether we do in-house on-prem storage or we go cloud solutions, and the benefits of either option. But that can't be done either without having the proper catalogs for our collections so that we can properly link the data, have the proper metadata, technical metadata, and intellectual metadata for being able to manage those documents properly and being able to help them, those clients, in our access piece, which the fifth box on the top right. So I'll speak specifically today about the components of how we implemented the digital asset management system. Our main solution is around Preservica, but we often talk about Go Anywhere as the front end that helps bring in the collections. It's a managed file transfer tool that really helps to fully integrate that process and actually helps us push that content out to clients as well. And Preservica is the main tool for managing, for conversion, for our collections. And our vision was to manage and make accessible all the copies of the digital asset that we bring in, enable a proper archival selection, appraisal, and arrangement of those collections, support the early quality control processes, and finding ways to automate all of those processes to put more emphasis on the value added that we can do to those collections, where a lot of the other processes can be automated and simplify the operations within the organization, and providing a synchronization across all our data catalogs. So to do that, we took an iterative approach to ensure that we learned each step of the way. And of course, as a library and archives, we actually started with our published collections for two reasons. We needed to quickly replace some of the systems that were related to our published collections, but also as a lessons learned, the structure of the metadata on the library side was much stronger than what we would have on the archival side in terms of standardization across our various partners. So we were able to get a lot of experience from there to understand how we would then move on to the different collections. We're into government records. We've done some private donor collections as well. And we will be heading into all our digitized, pre-digitized, and also digitization collections now. And to do that, we actually took a human-centered design approach with the collections themselves for our employees. So the human-centered design approach was so that we understand the full journey of the digital artifacts as they go through the process across our organization. First, looking at what was done in the past before we had more integrated automated processes, and how that will change for the collections, but for our employees and for our clients as well. And looking at designing a future state that has ideal workflows to simplify the process across the platforms, understanding and building awareness of the changes, because one of the key components in implementing new technologies and all that we're doing is the change management aspect. There's a big impact on all of us, in every part of the organization, and our clients, in terms of how things are changing. So change management has to be really on the forefront for all of the work that we do around the changing technologies, modernization of our platforms, and our digital infrastructure. So a big emphasis here was put on the human-centered design and to identify the measures for success and recommendations and next step for our different parts of the collections. So we created storyboards for various components. I'll just show you quickly just 4 that we did. But if you ever have any questions on those, we can share how that was done. So on the acquisition, cataloging, preservation for ingest, and preservation for retrieval. And so each of the storyboards was actually from the time there was interactions with the collections, you actually have various steps along the way, and you see where all of our employees interact with it, where there's technology interacting with the collections and its impact across all of the different platforms. So it helped us to be able to put a face to the collection so that we understand its impact. Because oftentimes we talk about an inert object, but it does have a relationship across time as it flows through. So we wanted to put special attention. And then we looked at other opportunities. So testing technology for managing ingest for digital holdings, the recognition at the federal level, the Government of Canada, that digital preservation is not unique to Library and Archives Canada, and needing to find ways to work early on with departments to look at their challenges for digital preservation, because some departments will not send content to Library and Archives Canada for another 50 to 100 years. So ensuring that they are meeting the requirements today and into the future. So to do so, we created an interdepartmental digital preservation working group, which I'll just speak to briefly. And we've also worked closely with partners internationally to gain experience from their work as well. So the digital preservation working group within the Government of Canada that we implemented was looking at data as a strategic asset for the Government of Canada. All of the collections that are held in departments, they are bits of data that will come to Library and Archives Canada in the future. And so we must ensure that we do work early on with departments to ensure its quality as it gets transferred. And it's important to ensure the government has the data it needs and it's well managed and secure. So we've worked closely on that question of the security, the migration of that content, working with departments that have a longer life cycle for the the collections and ensuring that they understand the challenges and they are able to face it head on and working with us to understand the solutions we're putting in place. And really ensuring that the long-term preservation of those records and long-term in the Government of Canada is anywhere over 5 years. And so that was all part of the work that we did in support of the clerk of the Privy Council for Canada, who had a data strategy roadmap. And there was a specific component related to digital preservation that we were able to get put into that report from the clerk. So it helped us to push to the forefront the issue of long-term preservation. And we were able to implement a checklist to monitor and know what data is, what needs to be done to protect it, understanding the nature of the problem, developing the capacity within departments, and helping to take corrective actions early on. And early means within the 2 to 5 year cycle to support departments with their long-term challenges. So in conclusion, the pieces that we put focus on is that data is a key asset that we all need to work on. Digital preservation is a shared responsibility. It's not unique to our organizations. We must ensure that the organizations we're working with have put in place the proper steps. And we need to look at an enterprise approach. So integrating with multiple agencies, organizations, to ensure that we have the quality, the government's interoperability, which has been a big challenge for all of us. And really, in the end, citizens expect nothing less from us than that. So I'm open to questions now, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sylvain. We still have more time. We still have about 45 minutes or in fact 40 minutes. We still have 40 minutes. And as the previous program, we're supposed to have 4 panelists, but I think that we just have three panelists. I just received the last mail about the new program. So I think that our 4th panelist is supposed to talk about the Danish, I think the Danish, the Danish National Archive, excuse me, there's something wrong somewhere, excuse me. No, it's okay. So it's okay, thank you. So now I think that we have followed 3 presentations. The first presentation was about the application of artificial intelligence in the project in the National Archive of Australia by Yaso Arumugam. I don't know if I pronounce it well.
It's perfect.
It's perfect. Okay. Thank you too much. And we talk about crowdsourcing, new trends in our domain. It was Ole Magnus who talked about it. And at the end, we talk about the digital transformation in the National Archive, the case of Librarian Archive of Canada. So now, after the presentation, I think that we have some element of discussion. We have something like 6 questions. I see 6 questions here. The first question to Ole: how many volunteers do you have? Are they compensated for their work? How are you performing the quality control of the crowdsourcing outcome? I have another question to Sylvain, another question to Andersen, and so on and so forth. So I think that we can reply. Okay, we can start by Ole, by the first question: how many volunteers do you have? How are they compensated for their work? How are you performing the quality control of the crowdsourcing outcome? So Ole, you have the floor.
Sure, I can say a little bit about that, and that will answer Natasha's and David Fricker's questions. The volunteers, the numbers of the volunteers vary naturally. For the digitization work, we have about between 100 and 150, and we cannot have any more. They are on a waiting list to help us with the digitization process. It's very, very popular. And the compensation, that will be coffee and cookies or something like that. That's all they get. But I guess the primary compensation, and that relates to David Fricker's question, is what is the motivation for actually doing this? Why do we have a waiting list for people wanting to do volunteer work? Well, that's because they see a sense of purpose in doing it. Most of them are members of genealogical societies and are recruited that way as well. And they have a specific purpose. We have digitized, or they have digitized, all death certificates from Denmark from the 1850s until 1970. And that's obvious use in their own research. But that's not the only thing. We have realized that we have that our volunteers find very much purpose in helping other researchers. So if we have researchers within the Danish National Archives or at the universities or whatever who wants to have made some data available, our volunteers are very motivated to help them because they can see a purpose of what they're doing. So I think that's the central answer to that question. For the transcription, we have approximately 500 crowdsourcers, I should say, who quite often help us this way, and you can concentrate it to about 50 people who do an immense work, and a lot more who do a little bit. But we have a nucleus of around 50 volunteers who has done an incredible amount of records about people. About the quality control, well, it's quite interesting because we have realized that the quality control conducted by the volunteers is higher than the one we actually do ourselves. Each transcription is qualified by 2 different other volunteers, and they can be very, very harsh in their critique of their fellow volunteers, sometimes to a point that we have to, well, these guys are volunteers, don't be too harsh with your critique. We do not do a systematic surveillance of all the transcribed posts, and it does not seem necessary as the quality of the transcriptions are very high. It is very high. And also we just have to admit that our volunteers sometimes are quite a bit more qualified in reading 19th century handwriting than we are ourselves. Esther, you'll need to turn on your microphone.
I said that, okay, sorry. I said that, Natasha, thank you very much for your very interesting answer. So we have another question. The question is to Yaso. Patricia said, thank you. Did you do cost benefits risk analysis? What is, in your context, the low-hanging fruits for auto sentencing? You have the floor, Yaso.
Thank you. So I answered a similar question. Let me see what answer I provided. So if we go to the answered questions, so cost benefit analysis. So it's how I've answered is it's not just based on simple cost savings. Why we started these challenges, there's a growing need that we have to do something different. And that's why it fitted into this discussion topic. We have to use new technologies to solve this old challenge because of the growing volumes of data. We're never going to have enough people, or we're never going to be able to attract and retain enough people to go about the same way how we are doing it now. That is a very manual, labor-intensive process. So the cost benefit is not just equating what someone does now with an automated process. It's about the cost of not doing it now means we won't be able to scale up. And if we don't scale up, then agencies are going to lose the records that they're supposed to give to us, which is a loss, which I don't think you can quantify by cost. And then the other extreme is because agencies don't know what they should be retaining, they could be keeping all their data, which would be a very costly exercise. So it's not as easy as a simple software replacement where you can do a cost-benefit analysis. It's multiple angles that you need to look into this problem, but it's actually something that we need to do something different. That's why we're keeping, it's not, while the proof of concept kind of proved that we were on the right track. It didn't say that we totally can't use machine learning or AI to solve this challenge. It actually said that's kind of the path that we need to go on. But the development of algorithms needs to develop further, and then all the computational power that it'll require to run through vast sets of data. So it's not a simple question that I can answer easily and say cost-benefit analysis. The risk of not doing is far greater than the risk of standing still. So I'm not sure whether I've answered that question, but trying to give you a bigger picture of why we've gone down this path. Hopefully that answered. Was it Natasha? Natasha asked the question before and I answered it online. So Patricia, hopefully that answered your question. Thank you, Esther.
Thank you, Yaso. But I also have a question further than what you talk about cost benefits analysis. I would like to know, when we talk about the professional issue, how is the relationship between archivists and IT experts in that particular project? We know that sometimes we don't have the same view. And sometimes IT experts think that tools can replace techniques. So I would like to know, how did you manage that particular aspect?
Yeah. So I'm very lucky. Had a great Director General, David Fricker. So I manage actually data and digital in my actual substantial role, which means I've got both sides. And actually had a branch meeting, had brought both sides in and making it more and more clear, one can't function without the other. So we're actually building more stronger relationships that even if, people don't say things like that, they can actually see the value of working very collaboratively with each other, that they can put themselves into the shoes of the other, because it's no point having technology in National Archives if it can't support the archivists. And the archivists in the modern age cannot be archivists without, digital technology. More and more government agencies are using digital technology. So archivists, like especially the Records Authorities section sits in the branch, data and digital branch. They want to be across digital technologies because government agencies are asking, okay, I've got information on M365, I've got information on WhatsApp, I've got information on Platform X. Now, what do I do with it? How can I apply the Records Authority, which is a document, into this complex platform and how can I ensure the documents and the records that I need to bring back into a record keeping system are identified and brought back. They can only answer those questions if they actually get a good first-hand experience in the digital technology. It's moved far beyond a theoretical answering a question. So I think we've been very successful at National Archives, where we've actually brought both and having them both in the same data and digital go together. I'm finding it much more easier, but I'm not sure whether it's the same story elsewhere. But I'm always half glass full too, Esther. So I'm always going to be very optimistic on anything that we can solve things. And it's the AI too. Again, you can either walk away. And to give you some context on the cost benefit analysis, this was actually classed as an innovation challenge. So we got funding by applying for an innovation grant. So the challenge was something, we only got funds because we had to prove that was a challenge for our agency. We had to prove that there was no technology out there that has ever been used to solve it. So it had to fulfill a few criteria. And why was it important for Australian government? So it was an innovation challenge. So we walked into it knowing that we needed it. It was full of risk, but we were very keen to encourage, especially small business in Australia, to put their thinking caps on, work hand in hand with us and try and solve it. There was one question on what could we have done better? I think what we could have done better is we knew exactly how complex it was, but some of those entities who came to partner with us, they probably thought, oh, it's the National Archives, how hard can this be? So they walked in, they walked in with a lot of confidence and had and good plans, but they thought this was something they will solve in 3 to 4 months. 6 to 9 months later, they walked away knowing the complexity of the work we do. Sometimes it's like finding a needle in a haystack. How do you make sure the correct record is marked as retained as National Archives? And that's going to be a growing challenge, knowing how much of data each of these agencies are collecting and when will continue to collect with an exponential growth. Thanks, Esther.
Thank you.
You're on mute, Esther.
Esther, you're on mute.
Yes, it's okay. It's okay. So I said thank you to Yaso. We have so many questions, and I will let me take this one. Adela Diaz asked to Sylvain. Mr. Bélanger, have made transfers of electronic native. He asked if you have made transfers of electronic natives. Sylvain?
Yeah, so so transfers of digital records, departments in the Government of Canada since 2017, anything they create has to be transferred to us in digital format. And so that's our preferred method. But we're working with department because departments are still sending some of it on physical carriers, which means that our digital preservation team will have to migrate that content from the physical carriers into our digital asset management system, which is a lot more human interaction with the objects than doing the digital transfers directly using Go Anywhere and Preservica between the client and Librarian Archives Canada. So there is quite a bit of work that we're doing there, and also because the environment, especially when we get our government records, a lot of that is in the protected environments, and we need to make sure that that is all at the levels that we need to as per the Government of Canada's security requirements. So there's still quite a bit of work to do with departments to be able to do the direct transfers, but we have implemented where it has to be a digital format. We no longer accept the physical item if it was created after 2017. That still leaves a lot of legacy collections that will be transferred to us physically, unless they are digitized by the departments or donors between now and donation time. So it's not a straight answer, and it won't be for a lot of us for quite a long time, because there's so much content out there that still needs to be manipulated by our experts to be able to properly transfer to us. Once it's within our systems, then we can automate a lot of those processes, a lot of that, the migration of the formats and ensuring the quality of the data that's in there. But that's something that we will be dealing with for, the next 15 years.
Okay, thank you. In fact, you have another question about what digital preservation technique do you use? I think that you talk about it just right now. Okay, other question to Ole, he talk about the volunteers. Are you also running any program to recruit and retain the volunteers? What do you think is the principal motivation for them to volunteer? It is for Ole. I think that he talked about the volunteer. I don't know if he has something to say about it or to add it.
Not very much, really, because that's the sense of purpose that we talked about in the last one. There are two other questions on the working on sensitive data, that we have sensitive data with living people here, and how can you do that in crowdsourcing? And the answer is you can't. Our crowdsourcers, our volunteers, can only use readily available data, which has to be at least 75 years old according to the Danish Archives Act, and even older if we use GDPR. So basically what the Linked Lives project can do for everybody, for the public, is to create a genealogical tree from 1787 until 1921 or something like that. But for research purposes, the data set will go all the way up to 1970, and therefore all the way up to 2022. But then you will have to be a researcher, and that also means that the digitization and the transcription or the handwritten text recognition of younger data is made by professionals. We cannot do that for crowdsourcing. And it doesn't really matter that much, because the newer data are likely more interesting for research purposes, whereas most genealogists are interested in, the times before 1945.
Okay. Sylvain, you still have 2 or 3 questions. I will be back to you. You have the question, can you share more the digital preservation working groups? Was it started by LAC, and how did it originate? Who are the stakeholders in the working groups? How did this group elevate agencies' digital capability? And another question for my friend David Frika. Sylvain, are you making progress implementing preservation standards across government agencies? Do you see a risk of loss, especially if records will not be transferred for another 50 years? So if you can say something about those 2 questions.
Yeah, perfect. So
yes.
As I mentioned earlier, the Digital Preservation Working Group was started knowing that we have the challenge across government in ensuring that departments who have long-term retention needs do not currently have an approach for digital preservation, for migrating that content to newer formats, to maintain access, and to be able to then transfer it to us in the still working order by the time they send it to us. So as part of the work that the Government of Canada was doing on having a data strategy, one of the recommendations was around the work of Librarian Archives Canada and implementing a working group to support departments and push departments to be able to implement processes, tools, and also good governance around their data quality, data retention. And so what we did is reach out to those departments that have the highest needs. So in Canada, it would be departments with long-term retention, Natural Resources Canada or Statistics Canada, for example, big partners with us with that challenge because they have long-term retention needs, 85 to 100 years. And working with them to understand the challenges that they will face with data versus having the physical object being retained, and then working with them to understand how we're doing the work for long-term preservation and the steps that could be taken. So that's a work in progress with those departments, and we've gotten great support from government to be able to implement those processes, but this is something that really each organization needs to do that. And it goes towards, in the longer term, having an enterprise approach to digital preservation. Right now, we have to implement the tools and processes for the content that comes to us once departments have done with it. But if we can help them in the forefront, and implement tools that'll make it interoperable, then it'll be a lot easier for all of us, all our organizations, and make that content available to Canadians much quicker. It is a challenge because there's no, and it goes towards David Fricker's question about the preservation standards across government agencies. That's all part of pushing towards having those preservation standards. We have a new policy and government framework on digital and services that's been able to push a bit on that, but it's not really about the preservation standards yet. So we're working closely with the Chief Information Officer of the Government of Canada, who's also responsible for information management and archival question with us. And so by pushing those discussions with those departments, we'll be able to have an impact across all government departments, but it does create the risk of loss for transfers that will be in 50 to 100 years. And that's why this department, we've tried to ensure we reach out to all the departments who have long-term retention needs so that it's on their radar today, because in another 5 years, there'll already be challenges. And we also, from experience, departments used to send us their physical digital objects on different types of carriers. And then our experts in-house are still having to extract that data, oftentimes missing information. So they have to rebuild the code that is from the 70s, 80s. So trying to find experts who still understand how that was programmed to extract that data and then make it available to clients can take weeks, months, and even years. So if we can do the work early on with the departments, that will make sure that there's no loss and that transfer is seamless when it comes to that.
Thank you so much, Sylvain. Let us go back to Andersen, to Ole. Sandy wants to say that she's more grateful for your sharing, but she wants to know, records such as the above mentioned tend to contain personal data and of individual. Is personal data and making it public? Is personal data and making it public an area of concern? If so, how does the Danish National Archives reconcile making the records open on one hand and protecting the data of an individual on another hand? That's a big challenge. How to manage? Please, Anderson, do you have any answer?
Just adding to my answer before, I think that it's an ongoing challenge, especially with the introduction of the GDPR in 2018 in Europe, Western Europe. and the EU, greater EU. And I think we're using the idea of being better safe than sorry at the moment. Right now, we are not publishing anything with sensitive data that is younger than 100 years. And that may be too conservative to some degree, but we have to find, and that's also, I think, something that the ICA or the European Archives Group needs to work on, so that we have a little more common ways of publishing records with sensitive information. Also, there's an ethical aspect of this. Why is it that sensitive information may be readily available when it's 100 years old? Sometimes it may be quite sensitive, even though it's more than 100 years old. And that has never been questioned before. So there's some there are some idiosyncrasies here that we need to work on. But our approach is better safe than sorry. However, that does not mean that you cannot do scientific research on the data. As long as you have the proper data security measurements, then you can use the records by anonymization, pseudonymization for scientific use, and that has not been a problem this far. And that's where the very nice registers that we have in the Nordic countries that are digital from around 1970, they're actually being extended back in time by making paper data digital and making the old paper data part of the big data that we use. So that has that has immense scientific value in many different branches of science. So
thank you.
That was the extended answer.
Thank you so much. Now, the question is to Mrs. Yaso. What would you recommend for those archivists who start the process of digital transformation? What would you recommend for those archivists who started the process of digital transformation?
Thank you, Esther. My recommendation is when you embark on the digital transformation journey, just think about the end-to-end outcome of what you want to achieve. So it could be digital preservation, but digital preservation means you need to be able to ingest digital records, and that needs a secure process to ingest. Then you need to make sure you prepare it to get into a preservation system. You need a catalog around it, and then you need to be able to access those records. So looking at the end-to-end picture will ensure that you can come up with something that is not complex. So my recommendation is don't go for a highly complex solution. And you might end up there when you don't think end to end, when you do, okay, digital preservation first, and oh, by the way, I need to get some records into it. And then next, oh, I need a catalog. And then you want to provide access. And when you start adding things on, it becomes really complex. So first is to take a step back and go, what works really well? Do you have any digital capability now that you want to reuse? Where are the gaps? And then when you look at the gaps, look at opportunities to see whether you can consolidate and transform at the same time, but always look at the end-to-end outcome. How do you get records in? How do you manage them? How do you preserve them? How do you store them? And then how do you make sure people can get access? Because if any one of those pieces don't fit together, your integration becomes really complex and you'll end up with a very complex system. When you've got a simple architecture, your business processes become very simple too. And when your business processes become simple, then you have staff that can learn very easily. And then you can build the people capability around it. And then you walk away with an end-to-end system that's easily manageable, that easily you can keep it upgraded, keep in step with the product updates you get, and make sure then you can grow this thing, and always take that step back and think big, and then then you go into implementation. So that would be my recommendation, Esther.
Thank you. Thank you for your recommendation. The people can read the discussion in the part of that because we have a comment here, a comment of Natasha. She says that first you need to get top management support for a convincing business case, and second you need to get money. So we still have less than 10 minutes, and maybe we can take two questions. The question is to Sylvain. Sylvain is so Sylvain, you have two questions. The first one is, does LAC use the same digital asset management system to manage both textual records, digitized and born digital, and non-textual records such as audiovisual records from public broadcaster? What are the considerations and challenges, if any? You and the Yaso have to synthesize administration to guarantee long-term investment in these technologies. And yes, this last question is to Yaso. Are you retention and disposition authorities taking into account the specific characteristic of a digital environment, or are the retention periods still the same for both paper and digital records of the same kind? So you can take the floor, you or maybe Sylvain first after Yaso.
Okay, perfect. So on the question of how we manage, what's managed with the digital asset management system, the system is used for all types of digital collections. So whether it's textual, digitized, or born digital, or non-textual, such as audio recordings, we have used it for all of those. The challenge here when it comes to audio visual is the size of the collections when they are audio video. We're currently cloud-based for our digital asset management system, and the size for the transfers, but also the storage and the storage costs. This is where you have to pay particular attention to the work you're doing. If you're on premise for doing that work, then you're managing your infrastructure and the storage and how much space you need for all that storage. But if it's a cloud, then the cost can be prohibitive because as the volume grows and it continues the cost monthly, for example, will continue to grow. So you have to pay that attention to that piece for organizations that might face challenges in terms of the resources, because it goes to sensitizing and then the administration on the long-term investment in technologies. We're at the point now where technologies like our digital asset management system are addressing a number of the issues that we need to deal with in our organization. So it's top of mind for our organization in terms of making sure that we have the right tools to be able to do the work. But we also have to be realistic in what we're asking for and what technologies we need, because we as a government organization have limited resources. So we need to be as efficient as we can be with the tools we have. So that's why, for example, our digital asset management system, we're utilizing it for many things because it has a lot of flexibility in it. And as we say, we're not going to go get new technologies until we find the limits to the ones that we currently have. And then after that, we'll look properly at what our needs are. But it's maximizing those tools before we actually try to get others is one key point here. But I'll pass it on to my colleague, Yaso.
Okay, Yaso.
Yeah, so building on what Sylvain was saying, if I go to that question about how do we guarantee long-term investment, I don't think we definitely don't have a long-term guarantee. I mean, currently the catch is unless something is critical. So recently National Archives did get an injection of funding, but that was to address some critical challenges. So going back to what Sylvain was saying, we actually need to pay more close attention on what we already have and maximize the use of the tools and the processes we have, and always think of the end-to-end picture, because I'm not sure whether any one of us has a long-term guarantee. One of many priorities that stack up when we take business cases to government, and we could end up at the bottom of the pile just because there are so many other priorities. So we just need to be making sure we also learn from each other, so that, and these ICA and fan forums are a great place where we can share our journeys and we can learn from each other rather than embarking on journeys where others have gone before and found that it doesn't work. So they are all long-term strategies that we look at because sensitizing administration to guarantee long-term investment is actually pretty hard. The other question I have, yes, so currently the retention periods for both paper and digital are same. And yes, Natasha, you're right, digital records have a higher value. We see currently the higher value is actually with the owner of the document, so the agency or the entity that's created the digital document has that a higher value. And it's only for a shorter period of time. So while we say it's got a higher value, data seems to, most data you can say, so 80% of the data will lose its value very quickly compared to paper records because there's more data coming. So it's a very complex space where we can't just use one simple formula, but it's a different challenge. They are more discoverable, more reusable, and in a government context, an agency that's creating data, there are many users to it, not just the National Archives. So it comes to us to preserve and make it available for long-term use. But for immediate use, there are many agencies that reuse that data as well. So we actually provide guidance on not just managing information, but make sure the information you create is also discoverable and interoperable, because that's important so that we don't have many government agencies all trying to produce the same data. So hopefully that answered that question. I know we have 2 minutes more, Esther.
Yes, just 2 minutes more. And I think that we can close now. And thank you for everybody to explain for us the new technologies to solve old problems. Particularly, I was interested by the presentation of Yaso, of Sylvain, and also of Magnus, talk about the particular issues, crowdsourcing, that is a new trend in our domain. Thank you so much. I hope that my English was not so very bad. More I speak, better I improve. Thank you so much. Thank you for the organizer, and see you very soon for the next session. Bye-bye.